chances are your unthought out, unintentional workspace is killing your performance. But don't panic. All right, it's going to be okay. That means if you change and redesign your workspace, you could potentially double your output. You want to build what is called a flow dojo. This is a term that was, I think, coined by Rian Doris, or at least that's where I first heard it. So let me define that for you. A flow dojo is a sacred space of singular purpose that is optimized for your workflow. So there are 3 pillars that make up a flow dojo. They are friction, focus, and mental conditioning. Let's start with friction. So friction refers to how much resistance a certain behavior holds. So to apply this to our flow dojo, we want to reduce friction as much as possible so that we can start work and continue working with optimal efficiency. So some things that increase friction unnecessarily are disorder, clutter, having to set up a workspace every time you work, like not having a dedicated workspace. The second one is focus. So with our workspace, with our flow dojo, we want to have a singular purpose, a singular focus. We don't want anything to distract us from that. But in this day and age, every computer has access to the internet, obviously. And with the internet comes endless distraction. So there's a very simple solution to this problem, and it requires 2 things. 1, site blockers. So you're going to get a VPN and you're going to enter all the distracting sites you go to. Instagram, Reddit, Christ. If you own a neckbeard, then TikTok, YouTube, whatever it is that obviously distracts you. Twitter, God, if you're on Twitter, get rid of that shit. So your site blocker, that will just eliminate it from your computer. You won't be able to access it, and that will keep you on track. But the second thing is your flow dojo must be a no phone zone. You cannot bring this thing, oh, naughty, whoops. You cannot bring that into your flow dojo. You need to leave it out. It won't provide you with any benefit whatsoever. You can miss a text or an email for, an hour. You're going to be okay. But all that's going to do is just invite distraction into your life. And it's actually going to make the whole process so much more painful when you have these distractions available, because your mind's constantly wanting to go there. And so you have to apply a lot of willpower not to do it. But when you just remove it from your environment, your brain accepts that and allows you to get into a flow, allows you to do some deep work without pestering you. So just get it out of there. Just get it out of there. And the third pillar is mental conditioning. So maybe you've heard about the dog bell experiment. If you haven't, I'll summarize it very quickly. A scientist experimented with his own dog. There you go. And he ran this experiment where he would ring a bell every time he would feed the dog. And so eventually, the dog, once ringing the bell, would start to salivate, even if there was no food present, just because the mental conditioning had associated the two so closely. They were intertwined so intimately that the brain could not separate the two. So you hear the sound of the bell and the dog just salivates. And this happens all the time in our lives, and we probably don't even notice it. But we can actually use it to our advantage instead of usually our disadvantage by associating your flow dojo with deep work. So certain ways I do this is I will light an incense. I got these Japanese incense, and they smell delightful. But the beautiful thing is, if I light this every single time I sit down to do work, then it helps to condition me to get back into that mental space every time I smell it. Similarly, you can use the same playlist, like I use a film score playlist when I'm doing work. That can again condition you to drop into a flow. Also, the aesthetic of your flow dojo, if it's nice and clean and minimal and just looks like a place of productivity, you're going to be more inclined to drop into that state of productivity rather than if it was a complete mess and all over the place and in your mum's kitchen. And the final mental conditioning point is that you only ever want to do work here. Again, that will just associate those two in your mind, and it will only get stronger and stronger until every time you sit down, you just automatically drop into a flow and start doing deep work. So 3 things that I make sure I do every time I sit down to do work at my flow dojo is I put on a certain playlist, I light an incense candle, and I only do work. I only ever do hard work here, because if you start, as I said earlier, going on YouTube or watching movies or whatever else you do on the internet, you're going to start to associate this as a place of distraction, and you're only going to continue to lean into that. But if you can kind of have a few mental cues, mental triggers that drop you into a flow state, it's going to get easier and easier over time to drop into that state. And you're going to have a much easier time being productive. Okay, so how do you actually design your flow dojo? Well, number 1, you want to get it in front of a good source of natural light, if you can. This helps to stimulate alertness and keep you awake, and is just good for you. You also want to keep it very minimal. You don't want to have much else on your desk or whatever your workspace is besides the tools you need to get the job done. And finally, invest in the right tools. Invest in better tools. So for me, that means this bad boy. This is the Logitech MX Master 3. And it might just look a little like a kind of a weird mouse. Why do you need that? Well, it has all of these extra buttons on it. And when you're editing, that is extremely helpful. Another small example of this is I used to always have flat camera batteries because my camera battery charger was like always in some box up in my wardrobe. And then every time I had to charge something, I'd have to get it out. And then it takes hours to charge, and then I can't shoot. And then I'm like, my battery's dead, so I can't do anything today. And then I just procrastinate the day away. But now all I've done is a very simple shift, is just blue tack it to my desk. And now every time I have a flat battery in my camera, I just swap it out with the one that's already sitting in the charging cradle. And that way I never have a flat battery, ever, really. And so I never have an excuse not to do the work. Christ. And that just keeps this kind of rolling. And because you shouldn't underestimate those small speed humps, because our resistance within us loves them. As soon as it even gets a whiff of a speed hump, it will just derail you completely. That, not having a flat battery in your camera could be enough to get me to not do any work for a week, because I'll just get into a rut. So these little things might seem trivial, but they can actually be significantly important. So kind of try and find a few of these things that consistently give you speed bumps in your workflow, and just use your flow dojo to smooth them out. And over time, you will see a great increase in your output in everyday work. So I hope this was helpful, because I've found it really helpful in actually being productive, doing some fucking work for once. So yeah, if you liked it, mad. I also really recommend you do check out Rian Doris. He is a great YouTuber. I've said it before on this channel. I did get this idea from him. And yeah, he probably has a video on it as well, which you'd probably benefit from. So check that out. But yeah, I think that's it. All right, see ya.